China is trying to ease tensions with India, but on the other hand, it is also sharpening weapons elsewhere. Is China trying to really reduce tension with India, or is it playing a bigger strategic game? Today, in this video, we are going to decode the recent report released by Pentagon, that is United States Department of Defense, that reveals real intentions of China toward India and Taiwan, and where does Pakistan fit in this entire strategic calculation. So first of all, to give you the context of this entire issue, in the key assessment that was made by US Department of Defense, that is also referred as Pentagon, US has clearly stated that China has made an active effort to reduce LAC tension. LAC we know is basically a line called as line of actual control that basically separates Chinese control and Indian administered territory in the Ladakh region. Now, it also has reflected about China's strategic recalibration, where on the one hand, it was earlier basically having animosity relationship based on confrontation in last couple of years, but that China has tried to basically reduce. And the reason behind this, given by the US report, is also to ensure that deeper India-US ties does not take into effect. Because whenever we talk about Indo-US relationship, we also know that one of the reason why India and US have collaborated, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, why India joined Quad membership or Quad group, one reason was to basically constrain or restrain China from showing its assertiveness. And US says that this is not the real policy of China, though they are trying to reduce the LAC tension. Somewhere this is an example of tactical thaw. It is not something that we can call as that will herald permanent peace as far as the Indo-US relationship is concerned. That is why there is need for India to exercise strategic caution. Now we know that Indo-China relationship since 1962 have never been what you can call as best, but it was better. However, in 2020, due to the clashes that we saw in the Galwan Valley of Ladakh along LAC, this resulted into the casualties. As per media report, 20 Indian soldiers were martyred, and also it led to a prolonged military standoff. Not only that, many of the areas which were earlier patrolled by Indian soldiers, they were not given access to by Chinese military. However, in the last year, when the meeting occurred or took place between Narendra Modi, Prime Minister of India, and Xi Jinping, the Premier of China, we saw that some sort of disengagement we have seen taking place along LAC, and the disputed points such as Depsang, Demchok, if talk about, both countries have then began to disengage, and again they have tried to re-normalize their relationship and all. If you look at the recent normalization steps, October 2024 was when the major step was taken, when the Eastern Ladakh Patrol Agreement was signed, and the Indian Indo-Tibetan Border Police, if we talk about, they began to again effectively patrol along the LOC. Military disengagement was seen here, and also the meeting occurred on the what we call as the by this summits that we had, the BRICS summit that took place in Kazan, Russia, and this was also very important and significant meeting because it was the first such meeting between Modi and Xi Jinping since 2020. Now, several confidence building measures also have been taken. For example, this particular meeting between the leaders paved the way for monthly high-level engagement between the senior officers, such as we have seen meeting between the foreign ministers of both China and India. We have seen meeting between the National Security Advisor from India's side, and this led to a lot of new initiatives. New initiatives, we can say restoration of the relationship to some extent, as the air services resumed again between India and China in the form of direct flight. Kailash Mansarovar Yatra was basically again after 4 years, it was again allowed by China. Kailash Mansarovar Yatris and pilgrimages can again start. Bilateral relationship to some extent we can say has stabilized, and reopening of visa services also we have seen here. Now, as far as the India's strategic assessment is concerned, it's not that India is fully now began to fully trust China. India also understand that there is a degree of skepticism, especially with reference to the border tensions that we have seen taking place between India and China across Ladakh region or northeastern region, as well as the claim that China lays over the entire Arunachal Pradesh as such. So there is definitely a trust deficit as far as India and China is concerned, and thus there are several structural irritants, and the biggest one is the border dispute. Unless and until border disputes are resolved permanently, the relation between India and China cannot reach its pinnacle point, its highest point as such, and that is why the entire development has a limited bilateral depth. Now, apart from this, talking about India-China relationship, the report of Pentagon also has stated that China currently has 3 core interests that Chinese government want to hold to highest level. First, in the entire Chinese politics, They want to ensure there is a control by the Chinese Communist Party. That cannot be something which can be compromised as such. Second, China has to continuously develop economically. They have to keep developing rapidly, and growth rate should be maintained at a higher level. That is also something that is non-compromisable, non-negotiable. And third point is sovereignty and territorial claim. As far as sovereignty and territorial claim is concerned, China today is talking about national resurgence, and they believe that this national resurgence cannot occur unless and until China have control over the Taiwan, which it believes to be a part of the sovereign territory of China, and Arunachal Pradesh, South China Sea. We also have discussed the 9-dash line, that is a disputed line through which China claims, and based on the history, it claims the entire region to be its own part, and it has entered into dispute with many countries such as Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and all that. Similarly, China and Japan, they have dispute over the Senkaku Island as well. So China somewhere believe that all these regions should be part of the China, then only rational resurgence can be possible as such. Now we are more concerned about Arunachal Pradesh because China claims this entire area to be its sovereign territory, to be integral part of its territory, and nothing but extension of South Tibet itself, and it calls it by the name of Jiangnan. On the other hand, India's position is very clear that entire Arunachal Pradesh has been and will always remain integral part of India. There is no dispute as far as the sovereignty of India over this particular state is concerned, and this is where the engagement between both countries are kind of expected and is missing also. Now, if you look at the Taiwan, US report also has highlighted that People's Liberation Army, they have focused on modernization, and one of the objective or aim is by using military means, if not diplomatic, they can have control over Taiwan. As such, they can basically again forcefully merge it with the mainland China. 2027, one of the stated military goal has been a strategic decisive victory as far as the Taiwan's position is concerned. As such, unification with Taiwan is considered as one of the major priorities the Chinese Communist Party, especially under the leadership of Xi Jinping, is trying to basically achieve. And overall, the force option has been retained, but at the same time, the probability of China directly attacking or militarily intervening in Taiwan in the recent year or in the next year seems to be unlikely. And the reason behind this is there is an uncertainty about the US intervention. Though US does not recognize Taiwan as an independent nation, but if the island nation is attacked by China, there is a high probability to some extent US forces will get engaged, and China is still not sure that whether their military is completely ready, battle ready to go ahead and have a war with US as well as its allies maybe. Now, as far as the China-Pakistan military axis is concerned, this is something that is the biggest irritant as far as the bilateral relationship between India and China is concerned after Arunachal Pradesh issue. And here also, the report has clearly highlighted that though India and China, or basically China, has attempted to again normalize the relationship or renormalize the relationship between India, at the same time it is also deepening the defense cooperation with the Pakistan as such, because as stated many times by the leaders of both China and Pakistan, that the friendship between both countries is something that is higher than the mighty Himalayas as such, and thus we can see the arms supply to Pakistan continuously being continued by China before or even after Operation Sindoor as such. And J-10C fighter jet is one of the major delivery that China has given to Pakistan in the recent time. Plus, also as we know that the modern warfare in the battlefield is largely being fought by using drones, unmanned aerial vehicles. So Kai Hong, Wing Loom, these are some advanced drones that China also has supplied to Pakistan in the recent time. And overall, the Department of Defense report highlight that China and Pakistan both are coordinating and are launching what we can call as a grey zone warfare against India as such. So when we talk about the grey zone warfare, also we can call it an example of hybrid warfare. It is such kind of war where what we can say attack is not directly against the territory as such. There is no direct engagement between militaries of the country, and that by using this, the overall threshold for going on war is basically maintained. But overall, what you can say, by using or participating in such kind of warfare, a coordinated pressure is being applied on India. And one example of this is information warfare in the media, in the social media space and all that. Also, during and after Operation Sindoor, when India and Pakistan were fighting each other for 3-4 days, we have almost both forces were engaged with each other. At that time, though, China was not directly actively involved in military confrontation, but US report highlight that China was actively providing support to Pakistan and Pakistani military in the form of intelligence sharing, in the form of cyber operations, and also electronic surveillance was being conducted by China on the behalf of Pakistan against India to ensure that Pakistan enjoyed a degree of upper hand in the war as concerned. So Pakistan to some extent by China is considered as a pressure valve. Before India and China can go at war, they want China basically you want to use Pakistan as much as possible to ensure that India remains engaged along its western border as such. Now, in this context, we also have to understand that it is not only that they are talking about this, about the, when talk about the national resurgence, when talk about the merger of Taiwan and the Senkaku Islands or even Arunachal Pradesh, it is being backed by continuous military and nuclear expansion plus increasing budget or defense budget of China as such. For example, in the 2024, as per the report of Department of Defense, China spent somewhere about 1.6% to 2% of its GDP, which in absolute dollar value will be very, very high as such. It's more than 350 to 360 billion dollars. If you consider India has spent also 2% of GDP, but because of its GDP value is lesser, it has spent somewhere about 70-80 billion dollars. So if you look at the gap, there is a huge gap. The difference is almost, we can say, of 5 times between the defense budget of India and defense budget of China as such. So this is also an area of grave concern. Plus, Chinese military have focused on rapid modernization as far as the rapid defense modernization is concerned. They also have begun to integrate artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. For example, recent report has highlighted that China has begun to develop 6th generation fighter aircraft. Not only that, they also have conducted sea trial for their 3rd aircraft carrier as such. Plus, they also have been active in developing hypersonic weapon, which can travel at a speed more than 5 times the speed of sound and all. Plus, nuclear warheads, they are also building up. A stockpile is continuously rising. In 2024, somewhere they have about 600 of nuclear stockpile, nuclear weapon, and by 2030, the number is expected to reach by 1,000. You compare that, India only has about 180 nuclear weapons in its arsenal as such. So there also we can see almost 8-10 times of difference you might see in the coming 5-6 years. At the same time, US vulnerability concern is also there, because as far as the report is concerned, it also is stating that under President Donald Trump's administration, relation between US and China has reached what we can call as the best as far as the recent couple of decades is concerned, and the Department of War basically will actively ensure that China does not emerge as a threat, and relation between both countries can remain cordial as far as possible, as much as possible. That is all about this particular video. I hope you got idea about the report and its finding. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more such content. Thank you very much.